Daniel is a well-known rich young master at University A. He is rich, willful, and unreasonable. At least, that's what the rumors say. However, the rumored rich young master is now standing in my narrow and shabby kitchen, cutting vegetables with a cold face. The sound of the knife chopping on the chopping board is extremely loud. With each chop, it seems like he is venting his anger. "Daniel, you're so noisy." I walked lightly behind him. "What? Do you think my cooking is disturbing your reading? Then have the guts not to eat." Daniel turned to look at me, his face looking extremely ugly, but he lightened the movements of his hands a bit. The barrage of comments appeared again. Others' rebirth. Kicking the scumbag and starting a perfect life. Daniel's rebirth. Crawling in the shadows and continuing to be a love-sick puppy for Daniel is really pitiful. After finally becoming the one his beloved, he finally hugged his long-awaited wife. But his wife only loved his money. Once his family went bankrupt, he was dumped. So what if he's a love-sick puppy? His wife is so beautiful. I'm willing to be my wife's love-sick puppy. I ignored those strange remarks and refocused my gaze on Daniel. Daniel was still cutting vegetables reluctantly. It was as if the words, full of grievances, were written all over his face. "Daniel, if you don't want to cook for me, then don't." Before I could finish my sentence, Daniel retorted, "Who said I'm cooking for you? I'm just so hungry that I have to cook something to eat. If you dare to take a bite, I'll turn on you right away." I sighed and turned around to walk out of the kitchen. Anyway, in the end, he'll just cry and beg me to eat. Sure enough, half an hour later, Daniel couldn't hold it in anymore. He walked into the bedroom holding a bowl of rice with a few chopsticks of vegetables on it. I put a bookmark in the book and then casually placed the book aside, preparing to make room for him. But before I could move, he stood towering in front of me and said stiffly, "I'll feed you." I was stunned for a moment and just about to refuse when he said fiercely, "If you say one more word, I'll immediately turn this bowl upside down on your head." What on earth did I do to deserve knowing such a person? I opened my mouth, and he picked up a chopstick of vegetables for me. Daniel remained silent all the time, feeding me without saying a word. Those barrages of comments didn't appear again. After the meal, Daniel disappeared. I don't know where on earth he went. I was really bored at home alone, so I wanted to go out for a walk. As soon as I opened the door, I saw Daniel leaning against the wall, smoking. The corridor was dim, and in the swirling smoke, his slightly upturned eyes just quietly stared at me. In my impression, Daniel doesn't smoke. Moreover, judging from his proficiency in puffing out clouds of smoke, it doesn't seem like his first time smoking. "When did you learn to smoke?" He seemed to be stunned for a moment, then looked down at the cigarette in his hand and said indifferently, "Oh, just learned it." After Daniel was kicked in his previous life, he smoked and drank heavily, lived a decadent life, and finally had his leg broken by debt collectors. Before he died, all he could think about was John. So tragic. I couldn't bear to watch that part and just skipped to see how Daniel continued to be a love-struck fool in this life. My eyes darkened slightly. I stepped forward, snatched the cigarette from Daniel's hand, threw it on the ground, and stamped it out with my foot. Daniel let out a sneer, his eyes and eyebrows full of mockery. "What? Afraid that second-hand smoke will harm your precious body?" I looked up at him and said seriously, word by word, "Daniel, don't smoke anymore in the future. It's bad for your health." Daniel was stunned for a moment, then lowered his head and murmured a swear word. Then he straightened up, looked down at me menacingly, and gritted his teeth and said, "Fine, since you don't let me smoke, I won't. But you have to promise me one condition." "What condition?" "I want to take a day off tomorrow." He said forcefully, "It means exactly what it says. I want to take a day off tomorrow and do nothing, including doing the laundry and cooking." I suspected I had misheard. "What did you say?" Daniel let out a cold snort, turned around, and walked into the house, leaving me with a tall and straight back and a sentence, "If you don't promise, I'll smoke all night." I watched his arrogant back as he left and fell into deep thought. Daniel is setting another flag again. Just wait. At 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, he'll appear in the kitchen on time to start cooking. Daniel, I want to rest, but I only dare to slack off for 1 day because I'm afraid that if I slack off for 2 days, my wife will really not need me anymore. I pinched the bridge of my nose and suddenly missed the first time we met. That Daniel who was unruly and grabbed my collar, wanting to fight with me. At least that Daniel seemed much more normal rather than being like he is now, like a moody lunatic. Although I'm also partly to blame. Just as the bullet comment said, at 7 o'clock the next morning, Daniel appeared in the kitchen on time. There was an egg frying in the pan, and he was propping one hand on the stove while holding a mobile phone in the other, seemingly sending a message to someone. Hearing my footsteps, Daniel didn't even lift his head and casually said, "Awake? You can have breakfast after you wash up." I stood beside him and asked in confusion, "Didn't you say you wanted to take a day off yesterday?" He didn't even bat an eyelid and calmly said, "It's not dawn yet, right?" I said during the day today. I took a deep breath, suppressing the urge to slap the egg on his face, and turned around and walked away. His voice came from behind with a hint of barely noticeable panic. "Where are you going? Breakfast will be ready soon." "No need. I'm not hungry." Daniel raised his voice a bit. "I've already made it. You have to eat it whether you like it or not." I looked back at him and said seriously, "Daniel, I don't want to be the center of your life. You don't need to revolve around me all the time. You also have your own things to do. I hope you have your own social circle. Do you understand what I mean?" Daniel was stunned and stared at me intently. It took him a long time to speak, with a hint of barely noticeable grievance in his tone. "So you think I'm annoying?" I sighed impatiently, explained, "That's not what I mean. I just think. Since that's not what you mean, then come over and have breakfast obediently." Daniel interrupted me, his voice turning cold again. "You can choose not to eat what I made, but I'll keep staring at you until you change your mind." I was so annoyed that I laughed. I raised my hand as if to hit him. "Daniel, are you crazy?" Daniel took the opportunity to hold my hand and gently rubbed it a few times. There was a hint of obsession in his tone that he himself didn't even notice. "Your hands are for painting, not for hitting people. What if you hurt yourself?" I pulled my hand back and looked at him coldly. "Daniel, we're just roommates. You don't have to do so much." Daniel was stunned for a moment and a look of hurt flashed across his eyes. But it disappeared quickly, replaced by a kind of reckless madness. "I'm willing to do it. Who are you to stop me?" I was speechless for a moment. Daniel took another step closer and stared at me intently. "I'm telling you, I'll not only do this now, but also in the future. I'll not only take care of your daily life, but also take charge of your future. You'll never get rid of me." I couldn't bear it anymore and slapped him. I put all my strength into that slap. Daniel was hit so hard that his head turned to the side. The corner of his mouth was broken and a trace of blood slowly oozed out. The air froze for a few seconds. Daniel slowly turned his head back. His eye sockets were bloodshot and his voice was hoarse and low. "Come on, you've hit my left cheek. Now give the right one a slap too. It'll be more symmetrical and look better." Let him have his fill of being beaten. Although Daniel is so handsome, how can someone look so good even when getting beaten? I shook my numb hand. I turned around expressionlessly, walked into the bedroom and slammed the door shut. There came Daniel's laughter from outside the door. Although it sounded like he was forcing it, he really did laugh. "John, I'm telling you, today you ignore me, but tomorrow you won't be able to reach me." I was too lazy to care about him and locked the door. Daniel outside the door still kept provoking me persistently. "John, I know you're hiding behind the door eavesdropping. If you have the guts, don't hide. Come out and face me head on." I lay on the bed, covered my ears with a pillow, and forced myself not to pay attention to the continuous noise pollution from Daniel outside the door. I don't know how long it took, but finally it was quiet outside the door. I opened my eyes, removed the pillow from my ear, pricked up my ears, and listened carefully. After confirming that there was no movement outside, I carefully opened the door a crack. Unexpectedly, I saw Daniel squatting beside the balcony washing machine with his head down, working hard to wash the clothes. Seeing me come out, Daniel raised his eyebrows with a hint of pride in his tone. "Oops, I accidentally washed your clothes too. You won't be angry, will you?" I pursed my lips and didn't say a word. I just silently stepped forward, took my clothes from his hand, and hung them up. Daniel followed me closely. Every time I hung up a piece of clothing, he would grab it and hang it on the hanger again. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I turned around and glared at him. "What on earth are you doing?" Daniel replied confidently. "I'm using practical actions to show you that even if you hit and scold me, I won't leave you. Who asked you to follow me? Didn't you say that we're just roommates? So your business is my business. Helping you hang the clothes is my due obligation." The sky could fall, but Daniel's mouth would hold it up. Although Daniel is crazy about John, almost like a dog to him, don't forget. Right now, John only has roommate feelings for Daniel. He's not the John from the previous life who was so money grubbing and forced himself to accept Daniel's confession. Their love is not equal at all. Daniel is doomed to repeat the same mistake because he simply can't control himself. Just like he can't control himself from helping John wash the clothes. I looked at Daniel and didn't know what to say. After a long while, I compromised and said, "Do as you please." Then I picked up the coat hanging on the chair and left home directly. Daniel didn't stop me, but I could feel that his gaze was always on me as if it would burn a hole through me. After leaving the neighborhood and walking on the bustling street, I suddenly felt a bit lost. After wandering around aimlessly for a while, I walked into a supermarket. Before I knew Daniel, I would never have stepped into such a place even half a step because I was poor. I was so poor that I relied on scholarships and various part-time jobs to get through school. Daniel's appearance disrupted my originally calm life trajectory. Although he always did some inexplicable things, I had to admit that with him around, I didn't seem to be so short of money anymore. Just as I was in a daze, I suddenly heard a familiar voice. "John, what a coincidence. Why are you here too?" I turned around and saw Benjamin pushing a shopping cart, standing in front of me in an extremely slovenly posture, smiling lazily. Benjamin is my high school classmate, a typical playboy. Different from Daniel, who has a mouth faster than his brain and is actually extremely innocent, Benjamin is truly a scoundrel. I don't have a good impression of him. It's not because he led the isolation and bullying of me in high school, but because every time he sees me, he looks me up and down with a look of sizing up goods. The blatant desire in his eyes makes me sick. Seeing that I didn't reply, Benjamin walked up to me on his own, looked behind me, then tilted his head and asked playfully, "Why are you alone? Where's Daniel?" I frowned and didn't plan to answer his question. Instead, I stepped aside to bypass him and prepared to leave. At the moment of passing by, Benjamin suddenly reached out and grabbed my arm, smiling mischievously and saying, "John, we're all old classmates. Are you going to be so cold when you see me and not even say hello?" I shook off his hand forcefully and replied coldly, "Sorry, I'm not familiar with you." Benjamin smiled. Not caring about my attitude at all, he took a few more steps towards me, lowered his head and got closer to me, whispering, "Right, after all, you ignored me at school back then." After saying that, Benjamin paused, squinted at me meaningfully and continued, "But it doesn't matter. I have an advantage. That is, the harder it is to get something, the more I want to get it." I stopped in my tracks and asked, "Can you do the laundry?" Benjamin was obviously stunned. He probably didn't expect me to ask such a question. Looking puzzled, he said, "No. Can you cook?" Benjamin frowned, a bit impatient, but still replied, "No either. You can't even do the laundry or cook. What right do you have to like me?" Benjamin's face darkened completely. Gnashing his teeth, he said, "John, don't be ungrateful." I let out a soft laugh, imitating Daniel's sarcastic tone before and saying, "Who exactly is being ungrateful? Don't you have any idea of your own worth?" The veins on Benjamin's forehead popped out. It seemed that he was extremely angry with me. He raised his fist as if he wanted to punch me. But considering this was a public place, he didn't strike for a long time. After a long standoff, Benjamin finally put down his fist, glared at me fiercely, threw down a "just you wait," and then turned around and left. I let out a sneer and was about to pay and leave. As I felt in my pocket, I found that I didn't bring my phone at all. How unlucky I was. I returned home empty-handed. When I opened the door, I saw Daniel curled up on the sofa sleeping, tightly hugging my pillow in his hand. I walked over quietly and stood beside the sofa, quietly looking at him for a while. The window was not closed. The wind was howling in, the curtains were fluttering, and the short hair in front of Daniel's forehead was also flying messily in the wind, covering his eyes and eyebrows. I reached out my hand involuntarily and gently pushed aside the hair in front of his eyes. There was a bruise under Daniel's eyes, and there were also some scratches on his face, which should have been left when he was slapped this morning. A sudden sense of guilt welled up in my heart, and I thought I might have been too heavy-handed. Just as I was hesitating whether to wake him up and let him sleep in the room, Daniel suddenly opened his eyes, and his dark pupils reflected my appearance. "You're back," Daniel said hoarsely. I subconsciously took a step back and stammered, "Go back to sleep." Daniel rubbed his eyes, sat up straight, threw the pillow in his arms aside, then stood up. His 185-centimeter tall figure instantly cast a shadow over me. I was stunned for a moment, then shifted my gaze uneasily and said softly, "Yeah, I'll get you a glass of water," Daniel said and was about to get up, but I pressed his shoulder and pushed him back onto the sofa. "No need. I'm not thirsty." Daniel didn't insist either. He obediently nestled back into my arms again, rubbed his head against my abdomen, and found a comfortable position to stay. I stood there stiffly, not daring to move at all. I don't know how long it had passed when Daniel spoke again. There was a trace of vulnerability and hesitation that was hard to detect in his voice. "John, I'm scared." I was stunned for a moment and looked down at Daniel. Only then did I notice that his eye sockets were slightly red. "What are you afraid of?" "I'm afraid. I'm afraid that I'm just a fleeting dream. When I wake up, you'll be gone, and I'll be left all alone again." Although I really want to scold Daniel for being a coward. He was tortured like that in his previous life, but he's still the same when he's reborn. But, John, can you have some pity on him? It feels like he's about to break down. Daniel hasn't had a good sleep since he was reborn. He lies awake until dawn at night, and when he finally falls asleep, his dreams are full of the despair and pain of being abandoned by John in his previous life. I'd be broken down too. I shed tears for Daniel, even when reading a novel. I don't want to read sad novels anymore. They're bad for my physical and mental health. The bullet screen drifted by silently. I pursed my lips, my throat tightened, and I comforted him in a low voice. "I won't leave, at least not now." I pulled the blanket aside and covered him with it, then closed the window to block out the howling wind. Daniel held onto my waist tightly. In a daze, I felt my body lift off the ground. When I opened my eyes, I found that Daniel had actually carried me and made me sit on his lap. I pushed him and frowned, saying, "Put me down. I'm heavy." Although my build is not as good as Daniel's, who often goes to the gym, I'm still a normally developed man. I'm 180 centimeters tall and weigh at least 130 pounds. Sitting on Daniel's lap for a long time would definitely make him very uncomfortable. Daniel hugged me even tighter. His arms were like iron clamps, firmly holding my waist. He rested his chin on my shoulder and said in a muffled voice, "You're not heavy. You're the thinnest person I've ever seen." After a pause, he murmured again, "And the cruelest." My heart skipped a beat, and an indescribable emotion welled up in my heart. It made my chest feel swollen. How desperate was Daniel in his previous life to think that I was cruel? I wanted to ask him, but I didn't dare to, because I was afraid of hearing those heart-wrenching things that had happened from his mouth. If I still can't fall in love with him this lifetime, at least I can hurt him less. Thinking like this, I couldn't help but raise my hand to ruffle his hair and said softly, "Daniel, if there's something you don't want to do, you can refuse me. Don't force yourself. I'm willing to do anything for you and have never forced myself." Daniel paused for a moment, his voice so soft that it was almost inaudible. "Even if I'm beaten and scolded by you, I'm still happy." I was silent for a while and then said, "Do you know what you look like now?" "What do I look like?" "You look like a dog wagging its tail, begging for the master's mercy." Daniel was silent for a long time and then let out a low woof. "Daniel, although my heart aches, no one understands better than me how to please John." Actually, Daniel has a hard time too. If he hadn't met John, maybe he wouldn't have been so miserable. Catching a glimpse of this bullet screen, I was stunned. Yes, if he hadn't met me, but someone else, he wouldn't have been so miserable. Thinking like this, I suddenly felt short of breath and couldn't breathe. So I struggled to get off Daniel and walked into the bedroom without saying a word. I closed the door and leaned against it. Before I knew it, my eyes started to sting. It turned out that without realizing it, I had also started to feel sorry for Daniel, but I still couldn't love him. That night, I slept restlessly and had a lot of strange dreams. In the dream, there was Daniel's face and the faces of many people I didn't know. They flashed before my eyes, overlapping and merging, extremely chaotic. When I woke up the next day, there was a wet patch on the pillow. I stared blankly at the water stain until Daniel knocked on the door outside and called me to have a meal. Then I came to my senses. I responded, got up from the bed, went to the bathroom to wash up briefly, and then opened the door. As soon as I opened the door, I saw Daniel standing at the door. Our eyes met. He stared blankly at me and even forgot to look away for a moment. I was a bit confused by his stare and couldn't help asking, "What are you looking at?" Daniel lowered his eyes and the tips of his ears turned suspiciously red. He stammered, "Nothing." I walked past him. As I passed by him, I vaguely heard him mutter, "Why are you crying?" So he was talking about the tear stains at the corners of my eyes. I stopped in my tracks, casually said, "I dreamed about you last night," and then walked towards the dining table without looking back. Hearing this, Daniel behind me immediately straightened his back. The sick-looking and listless person instantly came to life and excitedly followed me, asking, "Really? Then, what did you dream about me?" I didn't answer. After pulling out a chair and sitting down, I picked up the chopsticks, picked up a shrimp dumpling, and put it into my mouth. This shrimp dumpling was freshly wrapped by Daniel early in the morning, and the filling inside was all made by his own hands. It was fresh, fragrant, smooth, and tender, and incredibly delicious. Seeing that I didn't say a word, Daniel simply moved a chair and sat beside me, looking at me eagerly and waiting for my answer. I put the remaining half of the shrimp dumpling into my mouth, chewed it slowly a few times and swallowed it. Then I turned to look at Daniel and casually said, "I dreamed that you were kneeling on the ground and being whipped by me." Daniel blushed violently, stammered for a long time, and finally blurted out, Then whip me hard. I'm willing." I took a deep breath, suppressed the strange feeling in my heart, stood up expressionlessly, picked up the bowl, and prepared to go to the kitchen to get some porridge. When I passed by Daniel, he suddenly grabbed my wrist. There was a barely perceptible nervousness in his voice. You can play some other tricks if you want. Please don't go. We can role play. I can fulfill whatever kind of role play you like." I angrily pulled my wrist out of Daniel's hand, left a sentence, "I'm not as perverted as you," and then went into the kitchen with the bowl. I came out with 2 bowls of porridge. I put one bowl in front of Daniel and held the other one to drink myself. Is this for me?" Daniel pointed at the bowl of porridge in front of him, looking a bit incredulous. "Otherwise? Did I get it for a dog?" As soon as Daniel heard this, he immediately happily picked up the bowl of porridge and sipped it in small mouthfuls, secretly glancing at me while drinking. "Your attitude towards me seems a bit different today." I lifted my eyelids and glanced at him. "Really? I've always been like this." "You're lying. You never used to get porridge for me, and you also said you dreamed about me last night. Although the content of that dream is quite embarrassing, you never used to care about such small things before, let alone mention them actively. John, tell me, do you have feelings for me?" I took a sip of porridge, gave him a sidelong glance, and sneered. "An obedient dog naturally deserves a treat. I just took pity on you and gave you something. Don't push your luck." The smile on Daniel's face gradually froze. After a long silence, he slumped his head dejectedly. "It doesn't matter. At least I'm the only dog by your side. I'll bite to death anyone who tries to get close to you." My heart skipped a beat. Just as I was about to say something, I heard a knock on the door. Daniel suddenly stood up and strode towards the door menacingly. While walking, he turned back and glared at me. "Humph. No one but me can get close to you." I was shocked and stopped the hand holding the spoon. "Daniel, how long are you going to love me?" I ate this meal without tasting the food. After the meal, Daniel said he was going to his father's company. He didn't say what he was going to do specifically. I only knew that as soon as he stepped out of the door, a Maybach stopped at the door to pick him up. I stood on the balcony and watched Daniel get into the car through the rusty railing. The black car window slowly rolled up, blocking my sight. The Maybach silently turned out of the shabby and dirty old neighborhood and drove towards the bustling area full of high-rise buildings, quickly disappearing at the end of my vision. I turned around and walked into the living room. After randomly changing a few TV channels, I angrily pressed the power off button. The living room instantly fell silent. The TV screen went black, reflecting my pale and handsome face. I locked myself in the room for a whole day. It wasn't until the sky gradually darkened and the orange sunset filled the sky that I moved my numb legs, got up, walked to the balcony, and lit a cigarette. Taking a deep puff, The taste of nicotine irritated my nose, making me choke and shed tears. It had been a long time since I last smoked. When was it the first time I smoked? Seemed to be, oh right, it was in my senior year of high school. At that time, the pressure was high. All the classmates in the class were burying their heads in hard study, desperately wanting to get into a good university. Only I, due to long-term lack of nutrition, had been in a poor mental state. I often vomited and had diarrhea, and simply couldn't concentrate on my studies. I once thought I was about to die, so I bought my first pack of cigarettes in my life. Just like this, I huddled alone in a dark and damp room, lighting cheap cigarettes over and over again, feeling them burn out and turn into worthless ashes in my hand. I exhaled a puff of turbid air, threw away the cigarette but between my fingers, and watched as it was blown by the wind the moment it hit the ground, with sparks flying everywhere. I felt inexplicably melancholy. At this time, the phone rang abruptly, sounding extremely harsh in the silent space. I glanced at the caller ID. It was Daniel. Answering the call, Daniel's slightly drunk voice came from the other end. "John, come and pick me up. Where are you?" "I don't know where this is. It seems to be called Golden Splendor?" "Yes, that's it, Golden Splendor. Hurry up. If you're any later, I might be picked up by someone." Before I could reply, Daniel hung up the phone. Calling back, no one answered. I sighed, resignedly put away my phone, changed my clothes, then went out, hailed a taxi, and headed straight for Golden Splendor. Golden Splendor is the name of a bar. I've never been to such a place. One reason is that I find it too noisy, and the other is that I think it's too expensive. Unexpectedly, my first visit was to look for the drunk Daniel. Finding the bar according to the name Daniel mentioned, I pushed open the heavy glass door and went in. The deafening music almost blew me away. I finally found Daniel lying among a pile of wine bottles in a booth in the corner. I walked over and kicked him. "Hey, it's time to go home." Daniel looked up, mumbled incoherently, "Why did you come so late?" Then he grabbed the hem of my clothes and wouldn't let go. It took me a great deal of effort to pry his hand loose, pull him up from the sofa, and half drag and half carry him out of the bar. The late autumn night was extremely cold. A gust of cold wind blew and Daniel sobered up a great deal but still wasn't fully awake. I stuffed him into the back seat of the taxi, got in myself, reported the address of the community, then turned to Daniel and said, "Don't drink so much next time. It's very dangerous. Do you know that?" Daniel nodded his head repeatedly. The next second, without warning, he leaned towards my shoulder and murmured, "Wife. My head is so dizzy." I stiffened all over and didn't dare to move a muscle. The taxi drove smoothly all the way. During the time, Daniel called out "wife" a few more times, which made my heart tingle. After arriving at the community, I paid the fare. The driver helped to support Daniel out of the car. After thanking the driver, I supported Daniel and shuffled towards home step by step. With great difficulty, we got home. I was about to take off his coat and throw him onto the bed, but he grabbed my hand instead. Daniel looked at me with hazy eyes and murmured softly, "John, are you going to abandon me again?" I was startled. Just as I was about to explain, he pulled me into his arms and hugged me tightly. "Why do you always push me away? Is there something I did wrong that made you dissatisfied? Tell me and I'll definitely change." Daniel buried his head in the crook of my neck. Scalding tears ran down my neck and soon soaked my collar. "Daniel, don't cry." I nervously reached out my hand to wipe the tears off his face, but found that I just couldn't wipe them all away. Daniel cried more and more violently. In the end, he was almost roaring, "Why don't you love me? Why?" He kissed me frantically. The saltiness of the tears spread between our lips and teeth. His sorrow and pain engulfed me like a tide, making me out of breath. The strength in my hands propped on the table gradually faded. A hoarse gasp brushed past my ear. It was like a volcano that had been dormant for years suddenly erupted overnight. I was swept away by that heat wave and fell into the endless darkness. When I opened my eyes again, it was already bright outside the window. There was no one beside me. Only the wrinkled sheets and a faint lingering smell in the air remained. I got out of bed. I ached all over and couldn't help cursing under my breath. That guy Daniel didn't know his own strength. After getting dressed, I walked out of the room and immediately saw Daniel sitting on the sofa in a daze. He was wearing the white shirt that I had torn yesterday. The buttons were all crooked. He looked absent-minded. I walked over and kicked his calf. "What are you daydreaming about? What do you want for breakfast?" Hearing my voice, Daniel was so startled that he bounced up from the sofa and knelt down in front of me with a thud. I was wrong. What? What are you doing? Daniel lowered his head and didn't dare to look at me. He spoke as softly as a mosquito buzzing. I drank too much last night and did something I shouldn't have. So, you can scold me or beat me, as long as you can calm down. I'm not angry. I really wasn't angry. I just felt that my body couldn't take it. Seeing that I didn't say a word for a long time, Daniel slowly raised his head, carefully poked my elbow, and tentatively said, "You're not angry anymore? Then can you forgive me?" I avoided his gaze and said coldly, "Get up first. What does it look like kneeling down?" Daniel quickly stood up. A tall guy over 1.8 meters stood in front of me. Somehow he looked a bit aggrieved and helpless. Then do you forgive me? It depends on your performance. My back ached badly. I was too lazy to argue with him. I shuffled slowly to the balcony, lit a cigarette, leaned against the railing, puffed out clouds of smoke, and stared blankly at the blue sky in the distance. There came a rustling sound of footsteps behind me. A big hand covered my shoulder and kneaded it. The strength was just right. I closed my eyes comfortably as the flattering voice of Daniel came from beside my ear. "Let me massage you. Did I hurt you last night?" I gave a cold snort and didn't say a word. Daniel continued to massage me diligently while chattering on with all sorts of nice words, attempting to ease the tension between us. I took a deep puff of my cigarette and watched the smoke curl and disperse in front of me. Then I said calmly, "Accompany me to the hospital tomorrow." "What for? Are you sick?" Daniel's tone sounded a bit anxious, and he unconsciously pressed harder with his hands, making me grimace in pain. "Be gentle. I'm not sick, but I want to have a checkup." Daniel let out a sigh of relief and then asked in confusion, "Why do you want a checkup for no reason?" "Don't ask. Just go with me." I threw away the cigarette but in my hand and turned to face Daniel. "There are some things I want to find out. It's also a way to give an explanation to me. And you." I didn't say what those things were and just made an appointment with a psychologist for 9 a.m. the next day on my own. The next day, it started to drizzle. Daniel and I shared an umbrella and parted ways at the hospital entrance. He refused to go in and said he would wait for me in the car. I didn't force him and walked into the building alone. I took the elevator upstairs and arrived at the door of the psychological counseling room according to the appointment time and knocked on the door. "Come in." Hearing the gentle and pleasant female voice from inside, I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Sitting behind the desk was a female doctor in her late 30s. She wore glasses and had a neatly tied low ponytail. She looked very intellectual. "Hello, you're John, right? I'm your psychologist, Luna. Please take a seat." I pulled out a chair and sat down. My eyes involuntarily drifted to the window. It seemed to be raining harder. The raindrops slid down the window, leaving criss-cross watermarks. Luna pushed her glasses and asked with a smile, "Are you not used to this kind of environment?" I came back to my senses. "It's okay." Luna smiled and started asking some questions, all of which were routine questions like how was my sleep recently. I answered them one by one. Before I knew it, the rain outside had stopped and the sun penetrated the clouds and shone down, leaving mottled shadows on the ground. One last question. Have you ever felt that your emotions are abnormal or that you can't perceive others' emotions? I was stunned for a moment, thought about my words carefully, and then slowly said, "I seem to not quite understand others' affection for me." Luna nodded and recorded something on the computer. After a moment, she looked up at me and said gently, "Preliminary diagnosis shows that you may have mild emotional apathy. It's a psychological disorder. To put it simply, it's the lack of empathy, which makes it difficult for you to understand others' feelings and emotions. Of course, this is just a preliminary judgment. The specific result needs further observation and analysis to be confirmed." Luna pushed her glasses and continued, "But don't worry. Emotional apathy is not an incurable disease. It can be gradually improved through medication and psychological counseling." She handed me a business card with her contact information on it. "If you're willing to cooperate with the treatment, I hope we can communicate regularly." I took the business card, looked down at it, and there wasn't much change in my emotions. So it turns out I'm the one who's sick. I thought I was just heartless by nature. Luna smiled and said, "No one is heartless. It's just that sometimes the heart is wrapped too tightly and needs some time and patience to open it." It was already noon when I came out of the hospital. I got the medicine and walked straight to the parking lot and opened the car door. Daniel was taking a nap in the driver's seat. Hearing the noise, he opened his eyes and asked groggily, "Why did it take so long? What did the doctor say?" I took out the thin diagnosis report from my pocket and threw it to him, saying, "Read it yourself." Daniel took the report. Squinting his eyes, he carefully identified the words on it. After a long while, he looked at me in disbelief and said, You have apathy?" "Yes," I replied and turned my head to look out of the window. The vehicles on the road were coming and going in an endless stream. Daniel was silent for a while and murmured to himself, "No wonder you've never accepted me. Even when we were together, you were sometimes cold and sometimes warm to me. I thought it was because I didn't do well enough. It turns out that you simply can't fall in love with anyone. If I had known earlier, would you not have left me in your previous life?" His voice became softer and softer. Later, I could hardly hear what he was saying. I turned my head and found that his eyes were red and he was tightly pursing his lips as if he was trying his best to suppress something. "Daniel." I gently called his name. "Yeah?" Daniel was stunned for a moment as if he had just come to his senses. I leaned forward and kissed his eyes, whispering, "It's not too late to know now." Daniel was startled. A layer of water quickly covered his eyes. He fumbled to undo his seat belt and leaned over to hug me tightly. "You know I love you, right?" "Yes, I know. You've loved me for 2 lifetimes. And I've just started to love you."